Hi, John Farrell with the Farrell Law Firm. Today we're going to talk about where the U.S. presidential candidates stand on the estate tax. Well, why the estate tax? Well, that is probably the biggest tax that clients of mine have to deal with, and estate planning attorneys in general. Now, what is an estate tax? An estate tax is a tax levied upon the estate of a person when they pass away. For many reasons, this is why it is called the death tax. So it is levied on the estate of the person, and not necessarily on the person, but on the estate of the person when they pass away. And so generally, all the assets of the person are dropped into a big bucket. Depending on the size of that bucket or the value of that bucket, an estate tax is levied. Now, this is different from an inheritance tax, and a lot of people will confuse the estate tax and the inheritance tax. Well, the inheritance tax is levied upon the people who receive the inheritance and not the person who passes away. So the difference between the estate tax and the inheritance tax is who pays the tax. In the estate tax, it's paid by the estate. In the inheritance tax, it's paid by the people who receive the inheritance. Currently, only about 12 states enforce an estate tax, and most of them are found in the Northeast. But there is a federal estate tax, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. The federal estate tax applies to all individuals in the United States. However, for the federal estate tax, there's an exemption. And what that means is that the federal government has said, well, look, if your estate is below a certain level, then we're going to exempt you from the federal estate tax. This is called the exclusion amount or the exemption amount, depending on who you talk to. But essentially, that number is very high for 2024. And so it doesn't really apply to a lot of people, but we still get about 10 to 12 people a year that have to worry about this federal estate tax. I always tell them they've got the good kind of problems. Currently, the federal estate tax exemption is $13.61 million for an individual and $27.22 million for a married couple. So you can see this estate tax doesn't really apply to a lot of people because most people have an estate below those numbers. Still, we get about 10 to 12 people a year that have to worry about that federal estate tax. Let's start with the Kamala Harris campaign. Kamala Harris has indicated that she endorses the American Housing and Economic Mobility Act of 2024. What would legislation on housing have to do with the estate tax? Well, the Harris campaign proposes paying for those housing legislation by changes to the current estate tax system. Harris proposes dropping the federal estate tax exemption from $13.61 million to $3.5 million. So you can see this would significantly increase the number of people that the estate tax would apply to. Not only would it significantly increase the amount of people that the estate tax would apply to, it would also include a significant revenue boost for the federal government. She also proposes a change to the current tax level. So right now, the highest tax rate for states is at 40%. She proposes changing that to 55%, so a 15% increase, and it could go as high as 65%. So it's a significant increase in the amount of tax percentages that people would have to pay. So overall, she would favor increasing the amount of people that the federal estate tax would apply to, and also increasing the percentage that people would have to pay if that federal estate tax applied to them. To be fair to the Harris campaign, her proposal is a way to fund housing legislation for the American people, and that's really how government works. It works by spending taxes it collects from its people. To be critical of the Harris campaign, though, it would significantly increase the amount of taxes owed by people and significantly increase the tax rate that people would have to pay if that tax applied to them. Before we get to the Trump campaign, write in the comments below what you think of Harris's proposal to increase the federal estate tax. All right, so let's move to the Trump campaign. So if you look at Trump's time as he was president, you would see that it's clear that he wants to go in the opposite direction of the Harris campaign and actually make the estate tax applicable to fewer states. This was accomplished by the Tax Cut and Jobs Act that he signed into legislation when he was president. That legislation doubled the exemption amount that applied to the federal estate tax so that it applied to fewer people and raised it to the all-time high of $13.61 million that it is today. As a consequence of this, very few people have to worry about the federal estate tax. However, that legislation is set to expire at the end of 2025. So if President Trump wanted to continue the increase in the federal estate tax exemption and have the estate tax applied to fewer people, then legislation would have to be passed to continue that exemption amount beyond the 2025 calendar year. To be fair to the Trump campaign, the federal estate tax applies to so few people this day, the argument can be made, why not just get rid of it altogether since it applies to so few people? To be critical of the Trump campaign, however, governments work by spending the tax revenue it collects, and so having increased tax revenue would allow the federal government to do the things that it is designed to do. So write in the comments below what you think of Trump's tax proposal. Alright, so this video isn't designed to give you any insight as to who you should vote for, other than that you should go out and vote. But it wants to give you just an idea of where the Harris campaign and where the Trump campaign stands on estate taxes, which is very significant to my clients and attorneys in general who are involved in estate planning. Alright, so make sure that you subscribe to the channel because we put out new videos almost every day, and make sure you hit the like button because, hey, every like helps.